Here we go. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are on the cusp of Walpurgis Night, which you may know is sort of the a celebration of winter giving way to spring, kind of pagan and Christian connotations. But we thought that, us six members of the Florida Horror Writers Association here would make a humble offering of our stories this evening, in hopes of a good and bountiful spring here. We're going to begin with Christina Prasad, and I will pass things over to her.
Okay. Hi, thanks, Josh. Yes, my name is Christina Prasad. And the story I'm going to read from tonight is called The Lighthouse. It was actually one of my very first stories I've ever published. Unfortunately, the magazine's no longer around, but they were called Spectator and Spooks. The story is a folk tale, and it takes place on a beach and follows two young teenagers as they journey to find help after one of them gets hurt. And so we're going to kind of start the story in the middle and go along with it to the very end. So I'll go ahead and get started. You've traveled so far and so late, the woman said. Her voice trailed with honey. Will your parents not be worried? They know I can take care of myself, Kai said. Lonnie watched the boy stick out his chest. He had all but forgotten she was still in the room. And so young. Weren't you frightened? The woman continued. Nothing scares me, Kai boasted. The woman grew silent. She went to her little kitchen and turned her back to them. When she began to hum, then she began to hum a sweet sounding lullaby Lonnie had never heard before. When she turned around again, she held a cup in her hands. Drink this to calm your nerves, she said. She handed it to Kai, who took the cup without question and drank it thirstily, wiping his mouth with the back of his arm when done. You girl, you can go home now. I will take care of your friend and see that he gets all better. The woman took the cup from Kai's hand. When she spoke to Lonnie, all but a trace of the sweetness from her voice had gone. No, I think it's better if I stay, Lonnie said. It was at that moment Lonnie began to notice that Kai had grown exceptionally sleepy. The young man's eyes started to falter, his lids growing heavy and his mouth gaping with a series of wide and long yawns. Before she could ask him what was the matter, his chin fell to meet the rhythmic beating of his slumbering chest. What's wrong with him? Lonnie asked, her voice filled with alarm. She rushed to the boy and shook his shoulders, urging him to wake up. It's better he sleeps so I may work in peace, said the woman. She went to the kitchen again, and when she came back, she held a blade that reflected the flames of the candles in the room like a hellish mirror. What kind of doctor are you? Lonnie moved away from Kai as the woman came closer with her knife. She knelt by him, looking up at his face with such adoration, her eyes filled with a kind of madness Lonnie had never seen before. Your friend, what is his name? The woman asked. Lonnie looked from the woman to the front door that had been left ajar. She opened her mouth, expecting the answer to fall easily from her lips, but it did not. She realized then that she did not know the boy's name, nor had she ever gathered the nerve to ask. I don't know, Lonnie admitted. The woman smiled devilishly, still holding the blade in her hand. And yet you care for him so, a stranger. Lonnie wanted to run away and leave this place. This woman was no doctor. She smelled vile and wicked. Tell me, how long have you loved him? Lonnie felt herself stunned. How was it possible for this woman to ask such a thing? How was she able to reach her hand into Lonnie's very heart, to pluck at its strings and find the secret she had been keeping so dearly? Lonnie felt her mouth go dry, unable to admit that she had watched the boy with his fishing net many times before, that she had woken with the rising sun to see him sail away, and had run to the beach in the evenings, pretending to wait for her father's boat, while, in truth, she was waiting with hopeful eyes to see the boy return safely ashore, each and every day. With a twirl of her wrist, the woman placed the knife at the boy's neck. His eyes were still tightly closed, and he wore a peaceful look. In his sleep, he would never know what danger lingered so near. One slip of my hand, that's all it would take, said the woman as she played with the blade. Please don't, Lonnie pleaded. She blinked to hide her tears. What do you want? Youth. I want what he already has, my dear. Lonnie wiped her face. I don't understand. We must all die, but some of us have the ability to live on, much longer than others. All it takes is a little sacrifice. It's not too much to ask. Lonnie backed away until she could no further. You're a monster, she whispered. No need for such sentimentality, my dear girl. The woman stood from her place, a new gleam in her eye. You can save him, if you'd like. Lonnie said nothing. She eyed the woman suspiciously. I will simply take the print. Oh, I'm sorry. I will simply trade the prince for you, said the woman. She began to twirl around gleefully, settling on her splendid idea. The front door shut violently with the help from a sudden breeze. But don't worry, your sacrifice will not be in vain. You can continue to watch over your love. Every time you fear that he will be swallowed up by the sea, you can guide him out of harm's way. The woman reached out as if wanting to stroke the girl's face with love for the rest of his days. When the knife pierced her skin, Lonnie felt thunderous waves crash around her as she rose higher and higher from the rocks below. The unforgiving sea tore at her dress, and the moon blushed at her beauty. She looked out at the vast ebony sky and sea, her bright eyes piercing the dark. Boats of nighttime fishermen far and wide looked on in amazement as a light appeared from the place where only cliffs stood moments below. They would go home to tell the story, a story that evolved into myth and legend, the truth never fully known. Even Kai, with his graying beard and many mouths to feed, forgot the name of the girl who helped him that day on the beach so long ago, though she would never forget him, and with the beacon of her light, he leaned on her still. The end.
Should I go ahead and start? Okay. So I'm not chapters. I'm Douglas Ford, and I will dedicate this reading to the appearance of the Dark Lord on the highest peak of the Brocken. So cheers. I'm going to read from my story from Fear of Clowns. This is called No One Wants to Go to Happy Land, and I'm not going to get through the whole thing, so this is just part of it. Sometimes people my age remember Peaches the clown. Just as often they don't. Nothing about his television show appears in any records or databases. You won't find blurry recordings of old episodes on the web, and believe me, I've looked. People seem to recall Peaches the same way they remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, but only occasionally do you hear him mentioned along with other famous instances of the so-called Mandela effect, those mass delusions no one can explain. But I remember him and his TV show quite well. In particular, that last episode, the one that should have concluded his long journey to Happy Land. I remember because I was there when they filmed it. Such excitement and anticipation preceded that experience, especially when my parents explained that the filming took place quite close to where we lived, and that through some stroke of luck, they managed to get tickets so we could attend as part of a live studio audience. I even remember the envious expressions of my friends when I told them. We all looked forward to the end of school so we could rush home to watch the episodes of Peaches the Clown, a show that chronicled his misadventures with his friend, a talking elephant named Waldorf, as they tried to find their way home to a mystical, magical place called Happy Land. Along the way, they met interesting characters like a singing dog named Cassie, a mailman with a bag full of mail, but not one single letter addressed to Happy Land, and many others who tried to help Peaches find his way home. In each episode, Peaches learned an important lesson about love or friendship, but hilarity always ensued. As an adult, I often asked my parents if they remembered the day of the taping, but they always responded with blank stares. Like many people, they had no recollection of Peaches, not even when I prompted them with my own memories of how they made me wear my Sunday best and how the producer of the show came out at first with a special announcement. Today, he said, is a milestone episode. Today, Peaches will finally make it home to Happy Land. The audience didn't need an applause sign to tell them what to do. Everyone erupted into cheers. How wonderful for Peaches to finally make it to Happy Land, all the more so after spending so much time feeling lost and confused. Thank goodness he managed to persevere, thanks in no small part to his luckless but faithful friend Waldorf the elephant, always there to keep him from becoming too lonely. After the producer's announcement, the show began, though I remember so little about the actual story. No doubt seeing the cameras and crew distracted me from following the narrative. The border of the television no longer separated my reality from the strange, colorful soundstage inhabited by Peaches and his wonderful friends. Not even the interruption of the director could dilute the wonder unfolding before me, even when he stopped the action to tell the actor wearing the Waldorf elephant suit to stand in a different place or to make his trunk swing a certain way. Instead of making the world of Peaches less magical, these things made it seem more special to me. We shared the same world, a miracle. An even more miraculous thing happened next. Once more, the action stopped, and the producer returned to the stage to talk to us. We're going to take a short break, he said, but something very special is about to happen. When we return, we'll get to see Peaches finally, after all this time, make it home to Happy Land. Again, an enthusiastic round of cheers erupted. Now, just one thing, he said once more as we quieted down. We need a helpful boy or girl from the audience to show him the way. Who wants to be that little boy or girl? Naturally, every child's hand shot up in the air, mine as well. And everybody erupts into noise and yelling. And for some time, the producer struggled to make himself heard. Even speaking through the microphone didn't help. It seemed as if a riot would ensue. The whole time, Peaches stood off to the side, watching everything grimly, far from his usual happy self. When the audience finally quieted down, the producer shouted for everyone to shut up. Raising his voice while still holding the microphone caused noisy feedback to echo through the room and forced many people to cover their ears in pain. Then another miracle occurred. The producer pointed at me. You, little girl, the narrator's a little girl. You, little girl, he said, would you like to help Peaches go home to Happy Land? Did I? You betcha. Soon the disappointed groans turned into clapping as the spotlight found me. After a signal from the producer, Peaches climbed the audience bleachers to where I sat with my parents, and there he extended his hand. Despite the gesture and his painted smile, his face still looked grim. I felt suddenly afraid, but my parents looked at me with encouraging expressions. Go on, they said, and the sound of clapping rose as Peaches took my hand and started walking briskly, my short legs struggling to keep pace as we went down the bleachers and towards the back of the set. He seemed in such a hurry. Behind me, I could hear the producer remind the audience to stay seated because the break wouldn't last long and that the crew just needed a few minutes to prepare for that second half of this very special episode. Meanwhile, I began to lose in my struggle to keep up with Peaches. He gripped my hand and practically dragged me as if he thought I might try to break away and run back to my parents. I wanted to ask him what I would do or say when the story resumed. Would we get to eat something from the magical tree that didn't grow apples but fully baked pies instead? Would we get to try the mystical rainbow slide Peaches so often use to shorten the great distances he sometimes traveled? But we rushed so quickly and Peaches tugged so hard on my arm that it felt like he meant to pull it off. I had so many questions too, but I couldn't form the words as Peaches hustled us through the area behind the set, ducking and weaving past people holding cigarettes and watching with curious surprise. Someone called after him, but he didn't turn to look back. Instead, he took me through a dark hallway where a door waited for us at the far end. Without a word, Peaches kicked open the door, blasting us with the bright sunlight and warm air of a South Florida summer. I tried to stop. I dug in my heels, and only then did he actually turn his head to look down at me. I gazed up at his painted face and his red rubber nose. "Come on," he said. "Don't you want to come with Peaches?" Without waiting for an answer, he tugged on me once more. He fumbled in his pocket of his clown suit with his free hand as he dragged me across the parking lot. Cursing under his breath, he finally managed to extract a set of keys just as we reached an old station wagon, the whole time taking furtive glances over his shoulder. At that point, I started to cry. That prompted him to stop once more. This time he leaned down, his face close to mine, so close I could see the pores of his skin through the white makeup. On his breath, I detected a strange odor, like medicine. "Look," he said, "don't you want to help Peaches?" I nodded more than anything, but I also wanted to go back to my parents who probably still sat where I left them. I struggled to articulate these feelings. I could only say, "Aren't we going to Happy Land?" "God, no, kid. No one wants to go to Happy Land. If you really want to help Peaches, you'll cooperate and get into this car so he doesn't have to go to Happy Land." Then he smiled, and I saw that familiar expression I knew so well from TV. His breath didn't seem as rank then, and I stopped trying to pull away from him. That allowed him to open the door. He nudged me in first, then he took his position behind the wheel. We peeled out of the parking lot just as the door of the building opened. Out spilled a confused-looking mob, headed by the producer. I turned to watch his angry face recede in the distance behind us. I'll stop there. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Doug, and thank you, Christina, for your reading as well. I do sort of wonder about what will happen when we all get to Happy Land. Um, but next up, we have the godmother of horror, Elaine Pascal.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be reading a story from Pen of the Damned. I'll read the entire thing because it does fit in the time. Pen of the Damned has all free stories. So if you are interested in hearing more, go to the penofthedamned.com. And my story is called The Offering. Millie swept the sizable bug onto the lawn that grew alongside the cottage. There was no movement from the insect, not even the twitch of an antenna. By all signs, it was dead. She noted that the bug looked like it was sleeping, just as they say bodies in coffins, before eternal interment, look to be sleeping. With her foot, she pushed the bug beneath the rose bushes that her grandmother had tended for decades. Greta had been spotted in her garden longer than the next oldest person in the village had been alive. No one knew exactly how old Greta had been at the time of her recent death. There had been a trio of birth certificates issued in her name, all with different dates of birth listed. Recent death was the correct term, Millie thought. It was never clear if the woman had actually died during previous episodes or if they had only been scares. There had been times when the woman had stopped breathing. Her skin would grow cold, her body as hard as stone. Her spine would appear to curl in on itself, just like the bug beneath the roses. Minutes would pass, sometimes in intervals so long that she had to have crossed through the gossamer curtain between worlds. Then her breath would boldly return. Her eyes would flutter as if she had only awoken from a short nap. She would appear rejuvenated, revitalized. Some smirked and said that death was becoming on her. Some did not smirk and claimed she had sold her soul to the devil. Millie gave the bug another shove and watched as it fell into a hole that had been crafted by a critter. Bon appetit, Millie whispered to the snake or mole that was hidden in the hole, not knowing if it would accept an offering that was already dead. Millie rubbed a scab on her hand before returning to her chores. She decided that it was perfectly proper to not offer a burial for a bug that she had only known as dead. It had been the appropriate effort. No words, no sentiment. The flowers from the bush would be enough of a tribute. There had been a far greater tribute for her grandmother. Everything had been to Greta's specifications. Not everything, Millie whispered, rubbing her hand again. There was one aspect of the ceremony that her grandmother would never have agreed to. Then again, her grandmother had put her children and grandchildren through trials and tortures that they had never agreed to. It wasn't that the ceremony had been lavish, but it had been unusual. They had been granted a bed burial, even though those had gone out of style when ancient Greta's great-great-greats had been above ground. The family had received permission solely because the town wanted to close the lid, so to speak, on the woman who had outlived all expectations and also outlived the patience of all around her. Greta's bed had been handcrafted by her father, and it was the one possession she'd wanted to take with her. The bed had been lowered by ropes and pulleys into the massive hole first, its occupant lowered after. The sheet that had been wrapped around Greta had been the mechanism for gliding her into the earth. When the wind caught it, it fluttered like angel wings. What a devil, one of Millie's uncles had said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief as he stepped back from the open hole where his mother now resided. Millie did not know if he was talking about the energy required to bury her or about the woman herself. A beautifully stained piece of wood was balanced between the elaborate ends of the sleigh bed so that Greta would not be visible for the remainder of the ceremony. The family member took turns approaching the hole and dropping dirt on top of the bed. When they'd returned to their seats, Millie's youngest cousin whispered, "The bed squeaked." "The dirt landed on it. The dirt put weight on the mattress," Millie explained. "No, it squeaked, like when she would hear us whispering at night and get up to grab the switch," Millie's younger sister said. "Hush, little one, it's all in your head," Millie assured her. "And there was knocking," another cousin chimed in. "I heard her knocking on the headboard, just like she did when she wanted her tea in bed." "Hush now, that's grief talking." The scar on Millie's hand began to burn, just as if she were being branded by a hot iron. Again. If the tea was late or not hot enough, it was the switch again. "Let's not talk of that anymore," Millie consoled. "Those days are behind us." The rap, her knuckles on the board, she pounded just as hard as any man, just as hard as the devil himself. Millie hid her hand beneath her skirt. The seal that she had been branded with was glowing like live coals. Millie knew that the littlest ones were not imagining things. There had been sounds coming from the bed. Greta's final episode had been particularly lengthy, and Millie had been left in attendance. Millie had checked and rechecked vitals. She had held the mirror beneath the woman's nostrils. She had felt the waves of coldness ebbing and surging, and she had kept one eye on the switch on the wall, vowing that it would never be used again. Millie knew what she knew, and she knew when it was time to alert the family. She also knew when she saw the old woman's finger twitch as she was being covered with the sheet that it was time to make the offering. She had also anticipated the children noticing sounds. She'd anticipated the adults ignoring them. While Greta was capable of making noise on her own, it wasn't the old woman who had made the springs squeal and the headboard knock. It was the minion that had come to claim the offering Millie had made. She had made it, knowing it would not accept an offering that was already dead. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Elaine. That was wonderful. And I believe I'm up next. And beneath this grim visage, I am author Joshua Ginsberg, for those of you who might have been confused about that. I'll be reading tonight a story from Dark Speculations, Volume 2, about a voice in the wilderness. And this story, it's a short one, is called Dark and Deep. Jason sat up in bed and looked over the heap of covers that his wife Anne had cocooned herself within, straining to see the glowing red digits on the face of the alarm clock she kept on her nightstand. It was 2:16 a.m., the third night in a row he had awakened at that time. At least this time it was a Saturday night, and he could sleep in the next morning. Rather than try to fight his way back into unconsciousness, he stretched, swung his legs over the bed, and shivered. His wife insisted on keeping the apartment like an icebox, frigid and dry. It was as if she wanted to preserve some aspect of Indianapolis where they had lived before Florida, the place she was born and the only other state she had lived in. He decided to work on his manuscript, which was due in just under 2 months. It was his first book for a new publisher, and he was behind schedule. He wrote a couple sentences, then deleted them, rewrote them, poured himself a bit of bourbon, erased most of what he'd rewritten, and let it sit for a bit. It felt a little flat, but 32 words was still progress. He tried something he hadn't done in a while and pulled up a random poem generator website. It contained over 10,000 poems, and he used it when he felt he needed a bit of inspiration. It selected Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. He read it twice, pulled on a long-sleeve shirt, the one with the Tolkien quote on it in gold script about those who wander, and decided to go outside for a walk. He stepped out into the warm night air, which greeted him like a half-dreamed whisper. He walked down the paved roads toward the corner of the development, past a dozen other townhouses in the community. It was late September, and some of the doorways and windows already had up plastic skeletons and cotton balls pulled into spider webs. He found these incongruous with the palm trees, and if not for those telltale decorations, it could have been any time of year in this place that never knew the protracted and desiccated cold of a Midwestern winter. He swatted from time to time at mosquitoes and no-see-ums, intent on a taste of his blood, as he wandered toward the edge of the neighborhood, where dense trees and brush marked the start of a nature preserve. Here, the line between natural and unnatural was far less defined than in the urban sprawl Jason had called home for most of his life before he and Anne moved to Tampa. The neighborhood seemed to him a place between places, diffuse, liminal. The intersection of different worlds sometimes caused friction, of course. Mostly it was harmless and fascinating to see the variety and multitude of animals cross over from time to time. Armadillos, rabbits sometimes, snakes, gators, a raiding party of raccoons. He'd even seen a coyote once emerge in the early morning, sniff a few times at the unfamiliar scents and structures of human habitation, and then retreat into the woods. Sometimes, though, a house pet would go missing. A couple of years ago, a 4-year-old boy had disappeared. His family had lived in the townhouse at the corner of the neighborhood closest to the woods. That unit had remained unoccupied since. As he walked by it, he could see cobwebs in the windows, real ones, not the festive, decorative kind adorning the other homes. Jason came up to the empty home, passed it, and headed for the natural wall of tree trunks and branches. He noticed for the first time that it was not as uniformly dense as it appeared, and there was a natural tunnel large enough for a man of his size to gain entry. The streetlight cast a yellow oval of light like a bubble, from the very edge of which Jason peered into the darkness beyond. "The woods are lovely, dark and deep," he called into the tunnel. "But I have promises to keep," came the unexpected response. The voice was soft enough that Jason thought he might have imagined it, or confused it with the sound of a breeze whistling through the leaves and branches. It wasn't until an insect landed on his lower lip that he realized his mouth had been open. He looked deeper into the foliage and thought he saw a shadow or shadows rustling just out of sight, but he couldn't be sure. Maybe the outline of a child, also possibly with horns or antlers, then gone. He turned on his phone flashlight, but rather than dispel the darkness, the light seemed to feed it, emboldening the shadows until they became almost tangible. "Hello?" he called. "Hello yourself." The voice gave no indication of gender. It was soft but distinct, and though he could not connect it to anyone he knew, it felt familiar to him. Who's there? Who is it that asks? Not who's asking, Jason thought, which would have been less awkward, less alien. He tried another question. "Do you live here? In the neighborhood?" Silence, while the voice gathered itself. "Yes, we live here. We've always been here." There was something else Jason noticed, that the voice seemed less like one voice and more like the unified buzzing and humming of different things. It was the voice he would have assigned to a swarm of insects. He stepped closer to the tunnel, and through it he saw what appeared to be a greenish glow, flickering like a candle, but glimpsed only partially from between the vine-like web of branches. "You have some sort of party going on back there?" "Come in and find out," the voice suggested. Jason found the offer difficult to resist. He lifted one foot and placed it inside the mouth of the tunnel. Something snapped under his feet. He turned his phone light toward his feet and saw that he'd stepped on a pile of oddly shaped pale twigs. No, not twigs, he realized. The bones of a small animal. A squirrel or a cat, maybe. As he inspected them, it occurred to him that animals did not naturally decompose in a heap like this. It was more like something had sucked or gnawed the flesh from the bones and discarded them here. Just beyond the bones, he saw something else, a badly damaged and torn child's teddy bear. The stuffing burst forth in places, as it was being slowly consumed by some sort of moss or fungus. He tried to imagine how the toy had ended up there, and failed to conjure any scenario he found comforting. For just a moment he imagined following the strange voice deeper into a maze of ever-narrowing, twisting, winding paths toward the hidden heart of the woods, while behind him the branches wove themselves together like a net. He withdrew his foot and backed out into the yellow streetlight. "You know, I think I'll pass. I have miles to go before you sleep." "Yeah, miles to go before I sleep." Jason backed away slowly until the grass turned to pavement under his shoes. He returned to his building, where he locked the door and ran a hot shower. Afterwards, he wiped the fog from the mirror over the sink and stared into his own dark brown eyes, which, for just a split second, seemed as two twin sets of wooded tunnels stretching deep into a lightless wilderness, reflections peering endlessly into each other, nothing into nothing. He blinked, shook the discomforting image from his head, and climbed back into bed beside his wife in the crisp, familiar cold and mercifully voiceless darkness of the air-conditioned bedroom. And that is what I have. Thank you. And next up, I am excited to pass the conch or the mic or the bone fetish or whatever we're using to Seth Grayson.
Howdy. My name is Seth Grayson, and I'm reading a little snippet. It's called Small Gifts, and it's going to be a little chimera of inspiration of German field spirits, a little bit of Arthurian legend, and just overall witchiness. So, 5-year-old Abigail had come out to the woods with her mother, her aunties, and Rogan. They were supposed to be having a party tonight, and out of all the children at home, Abigail was the only one allowed to join. It was exciting, but truly the most exciting aspect was that she was finally spending time with her mother. She wasn't sure how long ago it was, but at some point her mother had started crying a lot. Her father left some time after. She never knew why or to where. Abigail only remembered him giving her the biggest hug, the longest, firmest kiss to her crown, and then watching him walk out the front door of their apartment. Her mother hardly spoke after, and sometimes she would leave without Abigail knowing. Things took another turn. Abigail would recall it as the day she had been the hungriest she had ever been in her young life, when her mother came home with Rogan Wolf, a tall man with long hair, tied back in thick braids. His eyes seemed too bright, his smile too wide. It was hardly a few days later that Abigail and her mother would move in to live with Rogan. Well, it wasn't so much moving as much as her mother simply picking her up from her bed and walking out the door with her, taking nothing and not bothering to lock the apartment. Abigail had thrown a fit, wanting her stuffed dog Pete. He'd been a gift from her father, and she felt safest with him. Now she lived with her mother, Rogan, and her new aunties and cousins in a house that didn't have enough beds. The kids all slept in one room on the floor. They shared clothes, and they had little playtime with many chores. She hardly saw her mother until most recently. Her stomach was bigger, and just once Abigail reached out to feel that round mass, only for her mother to sharply slap her hand away. It hurt and stung, and it brought her to tears instantly. Her mother didn't talk to her for the remainder of that day. But now here she was, outside of the city and in a nearby forest, when suddenly Auntie Deborah grabbed Abigail by the arm and dragged her towards one of the tents. Auntie Deborah was always rough when she washed the children, every stroke of a damp cloth firm and scratchy. It needed to be done, though. Abigail had gotten covered in dirt and leaves. Her naturally wild and curly hair needed to be braided for the party. The pain of the brush yanking at her sensitive roots brought her tears to her eyes, but Abigail had learned that nothing more than a sniffle was acceptable in front of Auntie Deborah. By the time they reemerged, darkness had dominated the area. The wind a little chillier as it helped the flames of the fire grow higher. Mommy was sitting beside Rogan, laughing and leaning into him as he stroked her back. Her other aunties hovering around them, one massaging Rogan's shoulders while another ran her fingers through Mommy's hair. Auntie Deborah approached them, Abigail tailing behind. Crick! She stilled, looking around and seeing the vague silhouette of trees that the light didn't reach. She glanced back at the adults, and seeing that they were fully distracted, she quietly slipped off towards the south side of the tents. As she approached, she noticed the light of the moon left a gap of indigo between the encompassing black night, and within it beady, bright eyes. She drew closer, and soon those eyes were accompanied by a shape. Hunched over in a thin, dark robe was a lumbering figure. A long, narrow face, a canine-like snout with a gauntish frame. She realized as she drew closer that those beady bits of light were simply the fire reflecting off of large, bulbous black eyes that stared right at her. A thin hand creaked as it beckoned her, and she approached. Abigail. The being spoke soothingly, and she felt entranced. That's right, darling. Do not look away. She obeyed, meeting this entity's gaze while in her peripheral she noticed malfigured shadows to her right and left rushing past. The leaves not even stirring beneath their swift movement, not alerting their presence, when soon she heard it. Screaming. Screaming followed by the explicit sounds of popping and cracking, heavy thudding vibrations of dense impact, one after another. There was frantic crying that had her bottom lip quivering. Child, you cannot know the fate they had planned for you. You are not the sacrifice they would destine you to be. The you whose neck would break before your first blood will not exist in this life. Your path ahead is rich. That hand jerked with a pointed claw between her eyes, just as she heard her mother scream in a plea for mercy ripped from her throat. That claw gave the lightest tap between Abigail's brows, and the tension inside her small body vanished, allowing tears to fall without reserve. She was only 5, but she understood now. She understood the significance of this gathering, and now the screaming was gone. For a long moment, the only sound was her breathing and the crackling of the fire. The shadows returned, walking back towards the trees, and in the arms of one, a slimy, bloody bundle that strained to cry. That creature is not yours to consider any longer, the being assured, a bony, dry knuckle fondly wiping her tears aside. Abigail, close your eyes. Her heart fluttered. She allowed herself one moment longer to try to memorize this being before doing as instructed. Count to 9. Abigail took a breath, then softly and calmly whispered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Her eyes opened cautiously, and the indigo space was replaced by a path lit with lamps, a sign with an arrow pointing, but the only word she could recognize was park. She stepped forward and jumped when she felt something beneath her feet. Her vision snapping to it, she couldn't believe it. After so long, it was Pete, looking just the same as she last remembered him. Abigail quickly picked him up, wiped away the dirt, and hugged him with the same tightness she remembered when her father last embraced her. She released one hiccuped sob before rubbing at her eyes. She almost turned around, but in the back of her mind she could hear that being gently warning her not to. She listened. With shaking legs, she walked forward, no fear in her heart as she held Pete cradled in her tiny arms. End.
Oh, thank you, Seth. That was wonderful. And now, for our final reader of this evening, I'm excited to pass things to Stephanie Jensen.
All right, guys, the demons are finally out and they are ready to party. So, I am reading an excerpt of my novella, The Howling of the Dead, just to give a bit of a backstory. This novella centers around a couple, Braden and Kylie. Braden's aunt passed away, and he inherited her cabin from her, where he and Kylie moved. And they're being haunted by Aunt Jackie and a whole bunch of other nefarious creatures. And Braden suffers from sleep paralysis, and it comes to the point when the sleep paralysis blends in with real life. So I used a lot of inspiration from different folk creatures and different myths and legends from various cultures to create the monsters in this book, and these coyotes are inspired by skinwalkers. So go ahead and start. Braden. Braden opens his eyes. He heard his name but couldn't see anything. He looks over. Kylie is next to him, sound asleep. Braden. The voice isn't a screechy scream. It's a soft, soothing voice. Braden. Braden recognizes this voice. It's Aunt Jackie's voice, but her voice before she died. The calm, soothing voice he remembers as a kid. Braden sits up. Surprisingly, he looks down at his hands and moves them. This isn't a sleep paralysis episode. What the fuck? He thinks to himself. Braden. He realizes Aunt Jackie's voice is coming from outside. Braden! Help! Braden jumps as he feels movement next to him. It's Kylie as she stretches and turns towards him. What are you doing? She asks groggily. She yawns, and Aunt Jackie calls out to Braden again. Do you hear that? He asks. Hear what? She responds. Braden. That! Braden exclaims. I can't hear anything. Braden gets out of bed and walks toward their back door. What are you doing? Kylie asks again. Braden opens the door. In the moonlight, Kylie can see his face change. He no longer has emotion on his face and confusion in his eyes. His face is expressionless, and his eyes look dead. Braden? She whispers. He ignores her and starts walking outside. Braden! Where are you going? Again, Braden ignores her. The door is still open. She can hear Braden's feet walking on the patio, then crunching on the grass. His footsteps stop. Braden, Kylie asks again. She walks toward the door. She's about to walk outside but stops dead in her tracks. She can see Braden in front of her, standing on the grass. A pack of coyotes surround him, almost 20 of them. Braden! Kylie screams. As she screams, the coyotes charge. Kylie runs out, but she's too late. The coyotes already got to Brayden. Two coyotes catch Brayden's arms. Their jaws clamp on his arms, ripping them off. Blood glistens in the moonlight, sputtering out of Brayden's body. Another coyote jumps up and grabs Brayden's neck with its bite. A fountain of blood pours out all over the grass. Brayden's body falls as more coyotes rip the legs from the sockets. Some coyotes are feasting on his limbs, while others are pulling the flesh out of his back. One coyote flips Brayden's carcass over with its muzzle. The coyote bites into Brayden's stomach and drags out its intestines. It feasts while the other coyotes dig into his stomach. Blood pours out over the grass as the coyotes chomp on his flesh, muscle, and fat. Kylie is in absolute shock. What can she do? She can't do anything. She's watching her boyfriend get eaten alive by a pack of coyotes, and there's nothing she can do about it. The whole pack turns toward her in unison. They stare intensely at her, not as prey, but as a threat. All coyotes tip their heads back, gaping mouths facing her. They all howl at the same time. Only, it doesn't sound like a normal coyote howl. It sounds like a combination of a human scream, a growl, and something distorting, a noise no animal can make. The moonlight shines over the coyotes, and Kylie finally gets a better look at them. They don't have furry bodies. Rather, their fur is patchy. They're standing on arms and legs. They don't have paws. Rather, they stand on hands and feet. Their hands and feet have long claws extending out of them. Kylie also notices something strange. They have no tails. The last feature she notices is the eyes. They have human eyes, not animal eyes. The coyotes are still making that shrieking noise, that same noise filling her ears. They're not stopping, not even taking a breath. Kylie remembers hearing coyotes when she still lived in Colorado. They would howl, but their vocalization would falter. They didn't hold the same note over a long period of time. Kylie puts her hands on the doorknobs as the coyotes are still making that same howling noise. She swiftly jumps inside, slamming the door shut and locking it. Kylie becomes dizzy. She falls on the floor, letting the darkness engulf her.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. And thanks to all of our readers, and especially to all of you at home who are viewing this. I wish you all a very happy and safe Walpurgis night. And as always, I wish you all a great deal of love and weirdness.
Go back
Take
to the
care.
bonfire, everybody.
Yes. Watch out for that maypole.
And for the witches and the demons, have fun. I'll be partying with you.
All right.